Hello everyone. Our first lecture is on scientific method, and this is chapter number 1 from the book. So we are going to discuss in this lecture about science and how science is done. So basically, what is scientific method? So before we go to scientific method, we will actually be talking about few terms before we actually go to the scientific method. So first of all, let's discuss what is science. So science is basically concerned with your surroundings, your concepts and understanding of these surroundings. And your surroundings basically include natural things as well as things that man has made and used. So basically science means the knowledge of your surroundings. So the scientists, they were inquisitive about their surroundings, and they were observing things happening, and they followed the scientific method, and they came up with new discoveries and new inventions that has changed the society. And basically, here's a term for the science. Science is a body of knowledge, a collection of unified insights about nature, the evidence for which is an array of facts. So how does science impact the everyday world? And also this week's writing assignment is on what is the impact of science in your life, or how does science influences your daily life, what is the application of science in your daily life. So science has basically done a lot. It has I would say has done wonders, because if you see in everyday's life, you can see we all of us, we have such advanced phones. We can the communication is so fast. We can communicate with anybody, any part of the world. We have emails in our cell phones. We have so much of social medias. We have Facebook on our cell phone. We have WhatsApp on our cell phone. I mean earlier people used to send letters to their relatives who were living at far places, and it used to take few days or few months for those letters to reach. Now just see how the communication is so fast. This is the biggest advantage of this technology. So we not only have these cell phones, we also have satellite technology, by which you can make the images of your house or far places with the help of satellite technology. Then we have DNA technology, which has done another wonders. You can move genes from one organism to another organism, and you must be knowing about the genetically modified food. It's all on the basis of DNA technology. So with the help of this DNA technology, people have cloned genes, by which the production of things, the proteins which are in traces, you can have those proteins in large amounts. So by gene technology, gene cloning, you can make a lot of medicines. So when you can produce these medicines in large scale by this technology, the cost of the medicine comes down. And people have cloned animals. Even human cloning is possible, but because of some ethical reasons, scientists, they are not allowed to do human cloning, but it is possible. So science has done wonders. Science has really done wonders. Now you can see here in this slide, you can see here, this is a picture of the computer in the olden times, and this is the picture of the computer in the recent times. But even actually, you can see how big the computer earlier it used to be, and you can see here a man sitting who was operating this computer. And then the size of the computers became small and small. This is still a big computer. We still have these laptops, these palm tops. Now we have actually the complete technology in these advanced, these smartphones. It's so advanced. Now you can see here, this is the olden city, and now you can see these our current cities. You can see how the roads are now, how the transportation system has changed. So it's all because of the wonders of science. Now science is to say science is basically concerned with making sense of the environment. And what does our environment includes? Our environment basically includes these objects. And what are the objects? Objects are basically things which can be seen or touched. For example, the glass of water, moving car, or a running dog. These are all objects and they all make our environment. Now what is a concept? Concept is the mental image of the about the object. So whatever is the mental image of something in your mind, the mental image of the object is your concept of that object. Now what are the properties? So properties basically means like when you are talking to a friend or somebody, if you have to talk about something, what are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about the properties of the object. And what are the properties? They are the qualities or attributes characteristic of an object. Like you can say yellow dress or green bottle. So when you are saying all these things, you're basically describing the properties of the object. Now what a reference? The way I just said, like lemon dress, you can say, like if you have to describe yellow color, you can say lemon dress. So when you are saying lemon dress, which means the color of the dress is yellow, and when you are using lemon, you are using lemon as a referent. So you are comparing the color of the dress with lemon, because lemon is also yellow and the dress of the color is also yellow. So you can kind of use a referent. So yellow, this lemon is a referent. Or you can also use something like sky blue, which means you're talking about something, anything. You can talk about a bottle or something, which means something which has a color of blue, and that color blue you're comparing with the color of the sky. So those things are like sky and lemon, these are your reference. Now when we communicate with others in layman's language, it is possible whatever we are saying, it is not taken by the other person in the same way. Might be that person is thinking in the other way. So this is all, like when I'm using the word lemon, yellow or sky blue, this is all layman's language, which means you may be saying something, the other person may be thinking it to be something else. So this assumption and vagueness can be avoided by using measurement in a description. Now, what is measurement? Measurement is the process of comparing a property to a well-defined and agreed upon referent. The well-defined and agreed upon referent is used as a standard, and that standard is called a unit. So basically, like if I'm saying if I'm using a referent as a lemon or sky, I mean it's just a vague language. What I mean to say, maybe other person does not perceive that way. So how to avoid this vagueness in the language? For that you can use measurement in description, which means you are comparing the property of something with something which is something standard. So in science, the scientific community has agreed upon some standard values, and whatever, when we are talking about some property, we talk in terms of those standard values. So then any person who belongs to scientific community knows what we are talking about, and that person is going to perceive as the same way as the person is telling. So this way the assumptions and vagueness can be avoided. So there are 3 steps of measurement: comparing the reference unit to the property being described, following a procedure specifying how the comparison is done, counting how many standard units describe the property upon consideration. So basically the essential part of the measurement is a number and name for the reference unit. Suppose you must be knowing the standard units. Standard units for length is a meter. So if I have some cloth and I want to know what is its size. So if I tell somebody it is 100 clip size, so if I just tell somebody like that, the other person doesn't know what's the size of the clip. The clip can be big, the clip can be small, so that is just something very vague. But we know the standard unit for length is meter. So if I tell somebody the length of this dress is 5 meters, now everybody knows that what meter means, because it's a standard value, and which means that if I'm saying 5 meters, which means the length of the cloth is 5 times meter. So it's essential to know in measurement a number and name for the reference unit. So meter is the standard unit or the reference unit we are using, and how many times of the meter? 5. So that is the way measurement is done. So this is example of the, I just gave you example of the dress and measuring it with some clips. So here is a book in front of you. If you want to measure the length of this book with these clips, so you can start from here, you can make a baseline here, and you can keep the one clip here, and you can see this clip ends here, then you can put the same clip here, you can see it's going up to here. So this way you can measure the length of this book. Maybe it comes out to 10 clip size, but if I tell somebody the length of this book is 10 clips, I mean, it's again a vague thing. So this is not measurement. So what is measurement basically means? The measurement is when we compare the property with something which we know is something standard. So to compare the property with something, some standard units, that is what the measurement is. So we have two kinds of measurement systems. One is the English system, and the other is the metric system. So English system is basically based on the parts of the human body. So again, this system is not a very correct system because it's on the basis of the parts of the human body. So if I say the length of this is 1 foot, now one person can have a big foot, another person can have a small foot. So again, this is not a very accurate system. The accurate system is the metric system, or it is also called international system of units. So this is a system which has been accepted by the whole scientific community, and it was established in 1791 by French Academy of Sciences. So the Academy created a measurement system that was based on invariable reference in nature, not on human body parts. So something invariable, which means if I say meter, meter is the unit of length. So that meter is something constant. That meter is something invariable. And if I say the length of this is 5 meters, which means the length of my dress is 5 times a meter. And we know that meter is something invariable. So according to this system, we have these units for the different properties. So for length, the unit is meter, and for the mass, the standard unit is kilogram. For time, it is second. For electric current, it's ampere. For temperature, it is Kelvin. And for the amount of substance, it's mole. And for the luminous intensity, it is candela. So these units are important for you to know for your quiz point of view. So you can get these kind of questions in your quiz or in your test. So what is length? What is the standard unit for length? It's 1 meter. Now what is 1 meter? So 1 meter is a distance traveled by light in a vacuum in this much fraction of a second. So this is something invariable. Now what is the standard unit for mass? It is kilogram. And what is 1 kilogram? So 1 kilogram is defined as a mass of a certain metallic cylinder kept by International Bureau of Weights and Measures in France. So there is one metal cylinder. The weight of that metal cylinder is 1 kilogram. So this is again something constant, something invariable. Then the standard unit for time is second. And what is second? Second was redefined to be the duration required for the certain number of oscillations of the cesium atom. So this is again something which doesn't vary. It's invariable. And also in this system, in the metric system, we also uses prefixes, which means like the unit of length is 1 meter, so we can have the measurement in decimeters. So decimeter is 1/10 of the meter. We can have in centimeter. Now what is centimeter? It is 1/10 of the decimeter, or 1/100th of the meter, or we can have in 1 millimeter. So we do uses the prefixes for the in the SI in the metric system. Now once you do the measurements, then you get the data, and then that data can be analyzed in the form of ratios. And in science we also use symbols and equations. So here is the example of the data. Like if you want to measure the dimensions of this cube, or if you want to, suppose you want to know the area of this cube or the volume of this cube. So for finding the area and the volume of this cube, you need to find its dimensions, and then you have to plug in those values in these formulas, and then you get the value of area and the volume. So for that you need to know what is the length and height and breadth of this cube, so that when you make those measurements, that is called your data. And data can be used to describe objects and also conditions, events or changes that might be occurring. For example, data on weather. And you can like then analyze those data by making the by having some ratios. Like here is example of, like if you have 3 cubes, okay, and they have different dimensions. Here is a cube which has the dimension of 1 inch, which means length, breadth and height is 1 inch. This is a cube with 2 inches, this is a cube with 3 inches. Now you can find, with these values you can find its area, you can find its volume. Once you get the area and once you get the volume, you can divide area by volume. So this is the ratio. So this is the ratio, this is the area versus volume ratio. And from these ratios you can make a lot of interpretations about the data. Now another important ratio is the density ratio. Now what's the density ratio? Density is a ratio of mass to volume. So here in this thing, in this equation, you can see some symbols, like we use M for mass and capital V for your volume, and rho is for your density. So density is a ratio of mass and volume, and you can know the density of different metals here. You have gold, iron, water and air. So you can see here, these are the density values. Density is the ratio of mass and volume. So you can see the density of gold is 19.3, iron is 7.9, water is 1, air is 0.013 grams per centimeter cube. So from here, by these density values, you can see which element is most dense and which one is the lightest. So gold is very dense and air is light. So we do use symbols. I just showed you some symbols. And what is an equation? So equation basically tells you relationships between the properties. And now very important thing to know is what is directly proportional and what is inversely proportional. So if you increase one variable and the other also increases, that relationship is called directly proportional, which means if A increases, B also increases. If A decreases, B also decreases. For example, I can give you example, like if you are eating a lot of food, okay, so you are eating a lot of food, so eating food is directly proportional to increase in your weight. So if you eat a lot of food, which means food is increased, your weight also increases. Okay, so this is the directly proportional relationship. Now another example is, like if you are at the gas station and you are filling your gas, filling your car with the gas. So the more time you spend in filling the gas in your car, your gas is going to get more and more gas. So it means that how much time you spend in filling the gas in the car is directly proportional to how much gas is there in your car. So this is a kind of a directly proportional relationship. Now what are inversely proportional relationship? Inversely proportional relationships are the relationships in which in one variable increases, the other one decreases. If one increases, the other decreases. Like for example, if you are doing a lot of exercise, if you do a lot of exercise, so which means the time spent in exercise increases, that is going to burn your calories, so your weight is going to come down. So these are kind of indirectly proportional relationships. Another example can be like if you have a jar with cookies. So the more time you are spending in eating those cookies, they're going to be less. There is going to be less cookies in the jar. So the more time you spend to eat cookies, less cookies in the jar. So this is another example of a inversely proportional relationship. Okay, so this was some of the things about some of the few terms we needed to know before we move towards the scientific method. Now what is scientific method basically, or what is nature of science? So basically, as you know, science is understanding your environment. What are the things going around in your environment? That is what basically science means. So science is different from philosophy. So philosophy is basically faith-based and science is evidence-based. So there is a way to do science which is called scientific method. That's what we are going to discuss. And all the scientists who have come up with great discoveries and inventions, they have followed scientific method. So what is scientific method basically? So scientific method is you actually do scientific method in your everyday life and you're not even aware of that. Scientific method is not something which only the scientists use, and it is not something which you use only in the lab. You use scientific method every day in your daily life. So basically what is scientific method? There are some steps. So first of all, you make an observation. So you will use your senses to make the observation. You will make the observation and then question will come to your mind. Okay, you make observation, question comes to your mind, and then your mind gives you a most probable answer to the question in your mind, and that is what your hypothesis is. So hypothesis is the most probable answer to the question in your mind, or you can say it is the most tentative explanation, or it is an educated guess. So you make a hypothesis and hypothesis gives you some predictions, and to test the hypothesis then you do a experiment. So to test the hypothesis you do the experiment, and when you do the experiment you get the data, and when you get the data you analyze the data, and then from the data you conclude. Okay, from the data you conclude whether your hypothesis is being supported or rejected. If your hypothesis is not supported, it's rejected, you are supposed to make a alternative hypothesis. Or if your hypothesis is supported, then you can do another experiment to see if your hypothesis is again supported, and once your hypothesis is supported by a lot of evidence, by a lot of experiments, then it becomes a theory. So this is the way science works. This is the scientific method. So here are some examples of the scientific method. So you can see, that's what I said, like scientific method you use every day. So look at this female, like her flashlight is not working. Now this is an observation that this flashlight is not working. So a question is going to come to her mind that why this flashlight is not working. So she's going to make some hypothesis. So number one hypothesis she's making is either the battery is dead or the bulb is burnt out. So next step will be to test the hypothesis. So if she replaces the battery and the flashlight works, which means her hypothesis was correct, but in this case it is not correct. So then she is going to make the alternative hypothesis or test the alternative hypothesis. So might be her second hypothesis might be the bulb is burnt out. So if she replaces the bulb and if the flashlight works, which means her second hypothesis is correct. So this is another example of scientific method from a very famous scientist by a very famous experiment by a very famous scientist, Louis Pasteur. He is a very well-known scientist in the field of biology, and he discovered pasteurization, which is a process by which the germs in the milk they are killed and the milk is becomes sterile. I mean, you can have that milk. So this is a flask. This was a flask. This is a sterile flask containing a sterile broth. So what Pasteur was observing, that after some time this sterile broth in a sterile flask was becoming cloudy, which means something was started growing in this broth. So this was his observation. So a question comes to his mind, from where this growth is coming. Why does this broth is becoming cloudy? So he made two hypotheses. Number one, might be there is something inside this broth from which these microbes are coming and started growing, or there is something in the environment which is coming in contact with this sterile broth and which is making this broth cloudy. So to test this hypothesis, what he did, he took this kind of a flask, a kind of a S-shaped flask. Okay, so here in this S-shaped flask, so earlier this was a flask when he observed, so this was a straight flask. So here the bacteria and all that can come directly in contact with this broth. But now he took the S-shaped flask, and in this S-shaped flask there is a trap here, a particle trap. So that trap is going to not let the bacteria in the environment to come in contact with this broth. So when he used this kind of a flask, he observed that there was no growth. Okay, so this broth was not getting cloudy. So what he did after that, he broke this, he removed this trap. So when he removed this trap, so all the bacteria in the environment could directly come in contact with this broth. And second thing he did was he just tilted this flask in a position so that this broth which is here is able to come in contact with this particle trap. Okay, so in both these cases he could see the growth of bacteria in the flask. So what is the conclusion from this experiment? So the conclusion from this experiment is there is something in the environment which is coming in contact with this broth. Only then this broth is getting cloudy. Only then this broth is getting contaminated. If you have this kind of a flask, and this kind of a flask has a particle trap here, the microbes in the environment, they are not able to come in contact with the broth, and he was not seeing anything. So this broth was clear. But when he removed this trap, or when he made this broth come in contact with this particle trap, it was getting contaminated. So this experiment proved that there is no spontaneous generation of life. Life comes from life. So this is basically overall again the scientific method: collecting observations, developing explanations, and testing explanations. So these are some of the important terms we use in scientific method. Hypothesis I already explained, and experiment, you do the experiment to test the hypothesis. And also always remember that in a science experiment you have to have a control in an experiment. So control is something, so control group is something, or control is something which you use to compare to. So control group is a group which you will be using to make comparisons with the experimental group. Now what is experimental group? Experimental group will be the group which is getting some treatment, or it is given some variable which the scientist is trying to study, and the control group is not getting that. So like for example, you want to see the effect of some fertilizer on the growth of some plant. So you will have two plants. You're going to put them in two pots with the same kind of the soil, and these plants will be given, both these plants in two different pots will be given same amount of water, exposed to same amount of the sunlight, but the only difference will be one pot will be getting the fertilizer and the other pot will one will be getting fertilizer, another will not be getting the fertilizer. So the pot which is not getting the fertilizer is going to be the control group, and the pot which is getting the fertilizer will be the experimental group. So both these pots are getting exactly everything same, so the physical environment is same, the only difference is the fertilizer, and fertilizer is the variable which we are trying to study. The effect of fertilizer we are trying to study. Okay, so once the experiments are done, and you get the data, you analyze the data, and you conclude your results. If your results, if your experiment is done quite a number of times, if your hypothesis is tried by different kinds of experiments and every experiment is supporting the hypothesis, then it becomes a theory. Now theory is very, very important in science. So theory is based on lot of evidence, and that evidence is done by doing scientific experiments. So there are very famous theories like the theory of evolution, the cell theory. So all these facts became theory when they were supported by lot of scientific evidence. Now what are laws? Laws are basically some important relationships which like occur time to time. For example, Charles law. So this Charles law basically describes the relationship between temperature and volume in the gases. So this law says that if the temperature increases, the volume of the gas also increases. So this is a law. Now what are models? So basically models is a description of a theory or idea that accounts for all known properties. Now basically it's a description of theory or idea. So basically like Watson and Crick, when these are the two very famous scientists who discovered the structure of DNA. So when they were trying to understand the structure of DNA, they were making the model of the DNA, because model is something which is going to describe a theory or an idea. So you can have the model of a solar system, you can have model of some atoms. So the last thing in this lecture is what is pseudoscience. So pseudoscience is a deceptive practice that uses the appearance or language of science to convince, confuse, or mislead people into thinking that something has scientific validation when it does not. So it is misleading and often absurd claims of scientific results. Now for example, like we all know that the organic food is free of the pesticides. So it's grown in the soil which is free of the pesticides. So pesticides are not good for us. So definitely organic food is good for us. But if somebody says that organic food, so these pesticides can be harmful to us. So it's good to eat the food which is organic. It's good to eat organic food for that reason. But if somebody says that organic food is very nutritious and it is more nutritious than the regular food, then it is pseudoscience. It is not correct. Or if somebody says something, makes you believe something by saying that some supernatural power exists and something is happening because of the supernatural power, that is all pseudoscience. If somebody is making such kind of claim, first of all, you need to see the academic and scientific background of the person who is making that claim. So you need to see how many research papers that person has produced, what are the institute that person is affiliated with, and how many scientific presentations that person has made, and does the claimant have something to gain by making the claim. So all these things we need to be very careful. So a lot of people try to take advantage of science and try to claim things which are actually not scientific. So this was the lecture on scientific method. I hope it is useful. So again, if you guys have any question about this lecture, you're most welcome to discuss with me. You can, if you have any question, you can send me the question by email, or you can send the message by text message on the phone, or you can call me. Okay, thank you very much.